Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're looking at Polestar. Is Polestar falling behind as an EV brand compared to the other startups out there, such as Rivian, NIO? Volvo Cars is handing back control of Polestar to Geely. The making of a success in the electric vehicle market is not easy to establish as a company, for a new entrant especially. This is something that is extremely challenging. Even Tesla, for all its most recent successes, faced plenty of challenges in the early days. Now, many of the EV startups are struggling, including Arrival. While Rivian volumes are modest and well below expectations, Lucid may have backing from the Saudi Arabian fund, but still, even Lucid struggles to manufacture a vehicle at scale. Now, Polestar major shareholder Volvo Cars, it's currently a part owner of Polestar and of course alongside with Geely, but Geely owns Volvo outright. And of course, as we know, Volvo's decided to move that responsibility to Geely full time, which also means that Volvo essentially has given up quite a lot of shares, handing those shares back to Geely. This leaves Polestar in a very interesting situation. It will no longer be supported by Volvo in a financial manner. However, it will still be supported by Volvo in manufacturing, research and development, sales, and aftermarket. Now, there is a handful of EV companies out there, and a great deal of these companies are actually undervalued in my opinion, such as Li Auto. Rivian is undervalued, Polestar is undervalued, and NIO is undervalued in my opinion. These are some of the companies that I would choose that I would say they have a great future. Lucid definitely has a great future, and I guess you could consider Lucid to be undervalued also. The EV companies out there right now need support more than ever. But we're in a very interesting time where they don't seem to be getting the support that they require. Now, a few years ago, this would have been unheard of. Early 2021, EV companies were booming, especially with the new IPOs that were coming out. But lately, there certainly seems to be a shift in narrative. You've got all these EV companies that are undervalued, but not a lot of investment going into these companies. Not as much as there used to be, of course. It's fallen by a lot. So what we're trying to understand is Polestar falling behind? And if they are falling behind, who are we comparing Polestar to? Because we can't compare them to Tesla. You can't really compare any EV company to Tesla. Tesla has been doing it for longer. Tesla has a built-up infrastructure to support them. They have plenty of fund. They're not short on fund. They're not short on infrastructure. They're not necessarily short on demand either. Although they do struggle with demand lately because they're low-end prices. But you can see Polestar decided not to lower the prices, while other EV companies, such as Lucid, had to. Polestar decided not to, and by result of that, they still delivered less vehicles than they wanted to. When you look at Polestar, you realize the market cap is $3.5 billion. This company is extremely undervalued, but I wouldn't really say it's falling behind such competitors like Rivian. But what about the other competitors such as NIO, Li Auto? In terms of NIO and Li Auto, they're definitely ahead of Polestar, if I were to be quite honest. The NIO expansion throughout the European continent is quite vast, and okay, it's not quite going into America yet, but to be honest, that's okay. I'd rather them to focus on expanding in the European market because a lot of the NIO vehicles are actually targeting the European market specifically. And Li Auto is just fundamentally an incredibly run company, selling plenty of vehicles, but they are limited to China for now. I don't believe Li is selling any vehicles outside of China at the moment. So that is something to keep an eye on because we need them to expand into Europe, expand into the American continent as well. Ultimately, that's what it's take. Recently, Rivian has announced that they will be bringing the R2, the Rivian R2 to the European continent. So these companies are expanding. Now, Polestar is in an interesting situation where they're already on almost every continent. Polestars are literally everywhere. In terms of sales, they are everywhere, and it's all thanks to Volvo. Volvo has helped with this in a huge way, and Volvo will continue to support Polestar in this way in terms of manufacturing, not to mention the sales and aftermarket. It's one of the areas that Polestar and Volvo will continue to be working together with. Volvo has only given up the control of financial support for Polestar, and it makes sense. Why put financial strain onto Volvo when they themselves need to focus on building their own EVs, such as the EX30, the X90, making sure that those vehicles are perfect. Why put financial strain onto Volvo if it's unnecessary? Geely is significantly more suited for that responsibility. But you can see there's a few things that Polestar has that other companies definitely don't have. Polestar has access to build their vehicles in the United States through the Volvo factory. Polestar is actually getting a new factory together to build the Polestar 5. And I do need to make a separate video on this because this is actually quite impressive. This was recently announced by Polestar. With the launch of the Polestar 5 creeping ever closer, we thought our electric performance 4-door GT deserves a brand new state-of-the-art manufacturing site. So it got one. And I quote, "We had a chance now to build that we call a dream factory," says Bernard, Managing Director of Operations at Polestar. Building a plant from the ground up provide the perfect opportunity to introduce new production techniques, the most anticipated of which is bonded aluminium unibody technology. Despite the complicated name, the theory is simple. By bonding aluminium, you don't have to worry about the 4,000 or so rivets you typically require to piece together the metal structure in a vehicle like the Polestar 5. This means lighter cars and greater design flexibility, a dream come through for drivers and designers alike. And I'm not seeing this being reported about enough that Polestar is literally building a new factory specifically for the Polestar 5. Now, I'm guessing this factory is funded by Geely. It's most certainly funded by Geely and by Volvo as well. Perhaps Polestar contributed some of their own money, but it's obvious to see that it's funded by the parent companies, and that's fine. That's what parent companies are supposed to do. They're supposed to support the smaller brands like Polestar, Lincoln Co. The list goes on. Geely has a great portfolio of companies that they need to support. But it really shows the dedication that Polestar is a company that's dedicated to itself long term. The brands are dedicated to Polestar long term. Geely, Volvo, they're dedicated to Polestar long term. And this is good to see, and we must pay attention to this. So I wouldn't necessarily say Polestar is falling behind because it has advantages that other companies do not have. Look at Rivian. They don't have those advantages. Rivian is not selling vehicles everywhere, not currently. NIO, Xpeng, Li Auto, they're not selling vehicles everywhere. Polestar is doing this. They're in like over 26 or 28 different markets in the world. They're doing incredibly well, but the volumes are low. And that's okay because they've only been selling one vehicle, the Polestar 2. What happens when they start selling the Polestar 4, the Polestar 3, the Polestar 5, and the Polestar 6? What happens when they bring new SUVs to the market? What happens when they continue to upgrade and update the Polestar 2 to improve it? What happens if there's a new Polestar 2? What happens if they create a more affordable vehicle, like a hatchback? They're going to want to create these competitors, especially if they're competing with Porsche. It's not to compete with Tesla, but it's mostly to compete with Porsche. So Polestar is well setted. You got to understand this company, its factories, they don't necessarily have to be gigafactories. That's the one company that necessarily do not need gigafactories. It would be good to have gigafactories, but they don't necessarily need gigafactories because their volumes based on deliveries will be quite low. At its peak, Polestar is probably looking at anywhere from 200 to 350,000 vehicles being delivered on a yearly basis. They're not looking to deliver 500,000 or even 1 million, a couple of million. They're not looking to do that. They're not Tesla. They're looking to be more like Porsche. Smaller numbers, not too expensive, but also not too cheap. A premium brand. So I wouldn't necessarily say this company is falling behind, but it is a very good question because there's also some parts that Polestar needs to improve. They do have their own weaknesses. The factory that they're using in the US, it's owned by Volvo. Polestar needs its own factory in the US. They also need their own factory in the European continent. It's good that they're getting their own factory in China. That's great. And I believe so far they've had to rely on Volvo and Geely factories. So it's good that they're getting a factory of their own. This is absolutely incredible, especially for the Polestar 5 as well. This is brilliant. So while Polestar is looking to bring more vehicles to the market, continuing to deliver vehicle at scale, you've got companies like NIO, Rivian, they're still looking to expand into new markets because they don't have the advantages that Polestar do with Volvo. But I hope this made a lot of sense. It's quite an interesting topic to touch on. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.